Hey y'all, how's it going? It's Sunday after our first week of Kant, and I thought I would give you a quick video response to some of your posts, in addition to the replies I've already made. Um, so I've got about 5 bullet points here I wanted to cover. I think if I cover these, I will have addressed most of the issues that I saw. As you can imagine, as you probably saw, students had similar responses at times, similar questions for Kant, so there's no need in me repeating those for each post. So the first issue I had here was several of you talked about this issue of how we learn ethics, where our ethical values come from. Some of you talked about people who learn them from religion or learn them from their parents, and others talked about kids who grow up in really difficult circumstances maybe are taught that lying and cheating and things like that are ethical. And so all of this, revolves around this idea that we learn ethics from our upbringing. Um, and Kant doesn't really care about that question. It's not a bad question, but it's not Kant's question. Because Kant believes that morality is about responsibility. And responsibility is only possible for yourself or for others. It's only possible for anyone if you are free to make a choice. And what that means, very simply, is that you are aware of your choice and you could choose differently. So for Kant, this makes all the difference. If you have become aware of your freedom morally, you're not 5 years old anymore, but you're aware that you can choose and you can think about your options. You're not just a robot or a zombie or something, but you can actually think about your choices. Then you are free. And if you're free, you're responsible. So it may be the case that someone is brought up in circumstances where they're taught bad values, where they're taught erroneously. And for a while, of course, they will act upon those, believing that those are accurate. But at a certain point, if they're an adult, they become responsible for finding out right and wrong. They can't say when they're 35 years old, well, that's what my parents have always told me, and I've never bothered to ask myself if they were right. Um, so don't get too distracted by the question of how do we learn ethics. As I say, it's an important question, but not really one for Kant, because he wants us to take responsibility for our actions. And in doing so, that means to admit that we're rational creatures who can think about our choices and make a free choice. Secondly, a few of you have gotten confused about something. I want to be very clear. If you read in the neat notes, I begin by talking about the issue of relativism. You need to be very careful when you read anything, my work or any other work. Just because a topic is mentioned and discussed in a section doesn't mean that, in this case, Kant agrees with that position. So the reason I brought up relativism is because Kant is dead set against it. And I bring it up because it's so popular and so prevalent in our culture to say everyone has an opinion, everyone has a different view of right and wrong, and no one is really right. We all have, we're all entitled to our own opinions. That's relativism. It means that right and wrong are relative to what people think. And Kant says, no, absolutely not. Of course we have opinions. But when it comes to morality, some opinions are true and some are false. And we can know it. And it's our job and our responsibility to know it and to hold ourselves to that truth. So Kant is not a relativist. He is as far as you can get from being a relativist. He believes that there is a single moral law that all of us can grasp with our minds. We have a responsibility to grasp it and then to choose to act upon it. And that law is the same for you and me in the 21st century in Waterloo, Iowa, as it is for someone living 3,000 years ago in Brazil, 500 miles to the west of us in Nebraska, South Dakota, wherever. It's all the same because morality is based upon reason. It's based upon our understanding of right and wrong, and that is something we can all grasp with our minds. So, how we learn about ethics, not so relevant for Kant, and relativism. Be very clear on that. Now, the opposite of relativism sometimes is called absolutism. So there is a right and wrong. These are absolutely true, and there's no wiggle room. That's Kant's view. Now, let me say, make a different kind of point here. I think it's something that students don't really expect when they study ethics. When we read about Kant's theory, we mean to say, with the word theory, we mean to say that it's an account, it's an explanation of morality with lots of different parts. Of course, we've talked about autonomy and respect and the law, these kinds of ideas, and reason. So there's many parts to the theory, but what makes it a theory is that all the parts fit together. So sometimes people call this a system of thought, a system of ethics. So, we could begin talking with Kant about in terms of autonomy. And in thinking through autonomy, which means giving yourself the principles by which you will act, we would come upon freedom. And in coming upon freedom, we would discuss reason, that Kant thinks we're free not because we have strong wills, but because we can think. So if we began with autonomy, we would come across freedom and the will, and then intentions, and intentions would take us to other terms, and we would end up discussing his entire theory because all of the pieces are connected. We could begin with intentions, and then we would circle around and end up with autonomy. We could begin with the moral law, etc., etc. It doesn't really matter where you begin. As a teacher, I just make a choice to begin writing on one topic I think is a good introductory topic. But my point is that you need to expect, for all four of our theories, really, that as you examine them, they will lead you to new questions, and the theory should address those questions. So if we begin with intentions, Kant should be able to explain why intentions are important, but then that would lead to more questions. Well, okay, if intentions are important, what do you do with consequences? And he would be able to explain that. Well, why are intentions important? And he would say, because morality is about freedom, and you can freely choose your intentions, etc. So you need to expect that these theories will try to answer all of the major questions that you have as you move through them, and that they'll fit together. They'll be like sort of like a system that fits together in the end. Now, you may still find weaknesses in them, you may disagree with them, but that should be your goal, to see them more or less systematically as a whole. All right. The two brothers example, I think, confused some of you, as you admitted, and that's fine. It's good that you admit these things. It's not always easy. So, I think what's confusing in that circumstance is that it sounds like Kant is condemning the brother who is naturally sweet and generous, and he's not. So both of the brothers, if you remember in the example, they both give money to the homeless people who come to the door. So they both perform the same action, but Kant's going to say, really, that's only on the surface. We make that distinction all the time. why did you do that? We see someone doing it, giving someone money, but it matters to us why people do that. So in this case, Kant's going to say the stingy brother could not have done it for external reasons. And what Kant means by this is there are sometimes reasons that surround you, peer pressure, your parents, your boss, right? External factors that might push you to make a decision. But there are also internal factors like your feelings and your desires. Maybe you want to avoid being embarrassed. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're just not feeling like being a good person. So there are external conditions and internal conditions. But Kant says all of those really are external to the will, which is to say you are capable of ignoring peer pressure and asking yourself what's the right thing to do. You're even capable of ignoring your own feelings of stinginess and hatred, say, for these people, and asking yourself what's the right thing to do. That's your mind at work. It's your intellect. That's what Kant calls reason. Reason is a different element of human life than desires, than friendship, than family, than feelings, any of these things. Kant thinks this is a real part of you, and it's the essential part of you. So if you follow his reasoning there, then you can see what's really going on. He's going to say the generous brother, in this moment, in this circumstance, may be allowing his feelings of generosity to prompt him to give money. Which is to say, he's not really using his reason. He's not really choosing freely. So Kant says, it's fine for him to do that. No one should condemn him. But there's no moral admiration there. If you learn that someone is helping other people, but they're not really thinking about it, they're not really choosing it, they're not really wanting to do it, but it's just something that sort of automatically happens, your admiration for them diminishes. That's different from condemning them. On the other hand, the brother who is stingy, who doesn't want to, doesn't feel like, has no reason external to morality to help these people, when he chooses to do it, he is admirable because he is grasping the moral law, choosing to obey it, even in the face of all of these temptations and desires not to. And that, Kant thinks, is morally admirable. That's what we admire in people. When we admire their morality, we admire their choices and their choice to do the right thing because it's right. You can imagine the consequences backfiring for one of them or for both of them, right? Maybe they give those guys money and those guys get a taxi and the taxi, is run over by a truck. You can imagine all kinds of circumstances where it doesn't work out. Kant thinks none of us would condemn the brothers for giving them money because in an uncontrollable way, through no fault of their own, the circumstances, the consequences turned out poorly. So morality is about the intention, and the intention has to be pure. It has to be devoted directly to the question of what is right, and then obeying what is right. So Kant would say, in those two decisions, the two decisions that the brothers made, he admires the stingy brother much more, not condemning the generous brother, but in those acts, those decisions, one is freely choosing to do what's right, and the other is not as free. Another set of issues that's come up have to do with, when you recognize Kant and his ideas and you say, boy, I think a lot of people think that way. It seems like Kant is describing something that I recognize. But then on the other hand, a lot of you have realized, well, not people don't really follow through with it very often. Maybe they kind of understand that they should do the right thing, but in reality, people don't act that way very often, or they don't, think the way Kant thinks about the moral law. And this is, again, irrelevant for Kant. Kant is not claiming that everyone chooses what is right. How could he? He doesn't know everyone. But he does claim that everyone has the knowledge, the potential. If they work, if they think about it hard enough, they have the capacity to understand right and wrong. And just because we don't do it doesn't absolve us of the responsibility. If you're a free, rational being, someone who can think about the meaning of their actions, then you're responsible for your choices. If people don't think their choices through clearly enough, if they don't work to understand the moral law, they're still responsible. That's a choice they've made. They're choosing to be morally lazy. And what really matters, Kant is saying, is not what people do, but what they should do. And nothing tells us what we should do except the example of someone who, in the face of all kinds of temptation, all kinds of desires, all kinds of circumstances pushing them to do the wrong thing, stands up because they know what's right and they obey it. That is the pinnacle. Kant says, there are two things in this universe that fill me with awe and wonder: the starry heavens above and the moral law within. He admires human beings, he respects human beings, probably much more than we respect ourselves, but he respects us because he believes we're rational and we're free, and we are able. If we fall short many times, it doesn't change the fact that we are able to understand and to follow the moral law. And he believes this should be the source of all of the respect that we show others. I didn't have it written down, but I think I need to say a couple words about that last idea, respect. So this is a very, very common idea in the modern world. It comes from Kant, and it has to do with the second way he talks about this categorical imperative, the moral law. And as you know, that way is the moral law can be described in the following way: never act in such a way that you treat the humanity in yourself or in others merely as a means and not also as an end. Let me just repeat this. I know it was on the other video, but it's very important. When a friend lies to you, it can really destroy your life depending on what they're lying about, right? But imagine if you find out a friend has been lying about you, and you realize their lies haven't hurt me. No one's believed them. It's had absolutely no effect on me. Nonetheless, you would realize that your friend doesn't respect you. And that would hurt. That would make a big difference. When we talk about respecting other people and wanting respect, this is Kant's territory. This is really where he thrives, I think, as a moral thinker. And he tries to lay out the moral law in such a way that we see that you can't be good. You can't say that your action is good. No matter how much good you're trying to achieve with your action, you can't say it's good if it requires or if it involves treating someone else's will, their mind, their reason, their ideas, merely as a tool, merely as an object for you to achieve this goal. And lying, for Kant, is the simplest and clearest example of this. What do you do when you lie to someone? Again, even if it doesn't harm them in any way at all, Kant says, you're spitting on their freedom. Because you lie to someone, you don't lie to a rock, you don't lie to a table, right? You lie to another rational being. You lie to another consciousness, to another will, another mind. You try to get that mind to believe something that's false. Now, some people just like to lie to other people for fun. Most of the time when we lie, we have some purpose in it. And most of the time, at least we're telling ourselves it's some good purpose. I don't want her to be angry at me. I don't want to find out what she's done, etc., etc. We always have a goal. But the very means of achieving that goal is immoral. Why? Because the source, this is where Kant's idea is a whole system. It all fits together. What do we admire in someone who does the right thing? We admire their will, their pure will, their intention to follow the moral law, even if the consequences don't work out well. We admire their intention, their free choice. That's exactly what we are denying other people when we lie to them. We're saying, I want to get your will to do something else that I want it to do. I don't want your will to be free. I recognize you have a free will, and if I told you the truth, you probably wouldn't do what I want you to do. So I'm going to manipulate your will. I'm going to take that very thing that we admire as the source of morality, and I'm going to use it as a plaything. That's why it hurts so much when a friend is lying to you. That's why it hurts so much. It feels like a betrayal when people disrespect you. Irrespective of the other harms that those things might cause, it's an insult to you. It says, I don't respect your will. I'm not willing to value your freedom and your will as something of value. And Kant thinks as soon as we do that, morality is lost. That's the only thing that can give morality its source, is people's freedom and their wills. All right, so I've gone on long enough. Please let me know if you have more questions, but you need to go back over my videos, go over my notes and the replies I've given. Hopefully, you'll have a good understanding of Kant for the test in a couple weeks. And let's keep moving on. Thanks.